We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
What's up, Cal fans? We are back with another episode of the Golden Bearcast, proud partner of the Blue Wire Podcast Network.
What is that question?
I am Ron Burgundy. My name is not Ron Burgundy. My name is Andy. I am one of the co-hosts of this podcast. Alongside me, as always, our sideline photographer, our king of hype, and perhaps someone who's about to get a dose of reality served to them in this podcast.
This is so stupid.
Rob the Bob, how you doing?
You really wanted to go with the third word there, but you couldn't think of a rhyme, could you?
After Bob?
You paused after Bob.
I was going to just see if I could do the whole thing, and then I bailed.
Oh.
All right. I'm not wasting any time. You don't even know what I'm doing. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to kick this thing off, and I created a new section of our podcast for 2024 called Instant Reaction Overreaction. Did I steal this from another podcast? Maybe. I think there is another podcast I listen to, the Rich Eisen podcast, where they do Overreaction Mondays. So maybe I did steal this. True innovation is hard to find these days.
We just stand on the shoulders of giants.
This is true. But today, my friend, we are not standing on the shoulders of anybody. Rob.
Oh, God.
What the hell was the first half of that football game?
You want the simplest answer? It's just guys getting rust off, not having played in a different team outside of your own for how many months? And that's pretty much it.
That's it. Calm, cool, collected Rob. All right, let's do it. Let's pull up the play-by-play. That half was terrible. Let me just get it started.
Yeah. But I mean, to be fair, I'm not saying that half was great, right? That's not, there's a difference between me saying it was just then getting the rust off versus like, that was an okay half. Like, it was a bad half. But for me, it was clear the rust came off at halftime and then the second half happened.
So, yeah, I'm with you, but I also have some questions. All
right, let's get into it.
My main first question is, how could you? You got me all hyped up again on 9 wins this season, and after a half of football, I was like, forget it.
My rebuttal to you is, did we lose?
Secondly,
yeah,
I texted you at that time.
Yeah.
And what did I say? I believe it was, quote unquote, I'm never listening to you again.
Yeah, but what did I also tell you? I told you to relax.
You told me to relax. Aaron Rodgers.
I told you to relax.
And
You,
then
you no. Well, let's be clear. You tweeted me a gif of the dog sitting in the fire room saying this is fine.
first of
And
all, I did not tweet nothing.
or sorry, you texted me.
This is a
You texted
high
me.
value text, sir.
You texted me, and then I said, "This is." By the way, for the people listening, this is mid game. Like I'm on the field, like taking pictures, and I'm responding to this man as he like just totally is just reacting.
Spiraling. That's what it's called.
I said, "LOL, everyone overacting per usual." He says, "Definitely not. I've never listened to you again." And I respond by saying, "It's the first half of the first game with players out." And then you said, "Nope, offense is terrible. Off will have." And I was like, "Text me after the game. I'm working right now."
That is when I got the "I'm done with you.
Yeah.
We're not talking till after the game." Then what did I? Then okay, so
then at 11:46 p.m. last night after the game, you text me the scene from Happy Gilmore that says, "I'm stupid, you're smart." Vindication. At least for the game. At least for the game. Not as
what a roller coaster. What a roller coaster. I mean, I do want to play back some of the emotions of this entire thing.
Walk me through your thought process of how the game like went.
I think I'm a big I like to think that I'm somewhat understanding of slow starts, especially when when they happen where it's like the first possession didn't look so good, because I do really think you are shedding the rust off, so to speak. And like Oregon got played super close by Idaho, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of teams got played super close in the Pac-12.
What
but
was
yes,
formerly the Pac-12.
Formerly the Pac-12. Well, two teams are still technically the Pac-12.
Two very important teams,
yeah,
that we root for.
That we do.
But I think that it's not hard for the Cal fan to spiral. And I do think that, like, while I would love to say that the coaching staff aren't culpable in this situation, I think they are. Because of how things have been set up. Now, whether you think, and could be a topic that we bring up later, that the 2 quarterback thing was actually more to throw off Auburn than it was UC Davis, and continued to be a ploy to throw off Auburn and not UC Davis. Wilcox would never admit that they would look past an opponent that way in public, but maybe in private. There's a world in which they're doing these things again for the bigger out of conference matchup, not the FCS opponent that was the first round, the first week opponent. But this game hit on pre-existing nerves. This game with 2 quarterbacks, it's literally, we have seen this movie. We have seen this television series. It's like we're on rerun number 6. And so I think when things started to look inconsistent and indecisive, and then also you think about like last season and turnovers. I think the radio broadcast said that we had like 14 lost fumbles and 28 fumbles on the season last year. It was like a big area that was poor for us. So I think that you started to see some trends of offenses struggling. We haven't committed to a quarterback. We're turning over the ball, and now we're turning over the ball for a touchdown. And then also, hey, the defense is giving up big chunks on first, second down to a team that probably shouldn't be doing that against us. And I think like that has plagued the Sermon defenses of years past, right? Like the defense of last year was really good as the season sort of went into its waning moments, right? It really, like, we got better and better and better in that sense. But where it was struggled is sort of in those early games where we would like see these players bouncing off our defenders and not wrapping up and doing like these fundamentals and all of that. So when we went in, and the only reason why we had the lead instead of being tied or literally being behind because they missed a field goal, was because UC Davis kicker could not make an extra point, and then Tim Plow, for whatever reason, decided not to go for 2 after they scored the second touchdown of the I think it was like the second quarter, and it could have been 14-14 or worse. I think it could have been 17-14.
You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo or honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker out there, you can try spicy ghost pepper, only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. Listen, I'm going to dare you to do it. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs that you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and then grab a few more napkins and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
But I mean, at the time, I think it was like 7, or it was supposed to be 7-6, and they missed the extra point, and that's where I was just like, all right, this isn't good. And then we had a couple of moments where it would be like third and 1. I think we like the O-line starts struggling. There's just a lot that like, it's like we've seen this movie. It would be different if it was like, I mean, I guess it wouldn't be different. Maybe it's like when you have a head coach for this long, this is the movie that you're watching and you're sort of used to it. It's like I was going to say like, maybe there's a special teams play that, but it's like, oh, we've kind of had spotty special teams. So like, maybe it's just that there isn't a movie that we could see that we wouldn't have some level of familiarity with. But I think that it would be slightly different if we had seen like an offense that was struggling to connect on like big throws downfield or a bunch of trick plays and stuff like that. Things that were outside of what we sort of think is a known commodity at this point. And so I think it fit into that narrative really easily and what I took away from it was the questions that we should have been asking on the last 2 podcasts from fall camp were not about, hey, which player is going to stand out, but really should have been about who, like, when we think about offensive coaching staff and changes, like when we brought in Spav, we agreed to that the former strategy was not working and that we were going to do something more drastic to modernize our offense. And so then the question becomes to me is, as we have seen Blesh do well in a scripted environment and then struggle in a scripted environment, should my questions to you have been more related about, are we changing enough from what we used to be? Or are we going back a little bit to the previous versions of this offense that were quite frustrating and underwhelming? So that was a lot. And I don't expect you to answer all of that. And in the last piece, like, you don't have to touch on it. It's just like one of those questions that I was reflecting on. But from your perspective, Rob, how many of the fans in your life or around you or at the stadium? I mean, I know you can feel that exhale. I thought Cal was potentially going to get, if Noel Williams doesn't return that kick for a touchdown, Cal's getting booed off the field at halftime, right? Like, there's no way.
Oh, you mean you think they're losing going into halftime?
Like 13-7?
Probably. Yeah, that makes sense.
Scores 13-7. I was like, oh man, I can hear it now. But yeah, I want to hear, like, what were you hearing? What were you feeling? What was your experience?
I think for me it was just it's the same response that you and I have, or the same like thought process, but it's a different like view of how I believe the outcome was going to be. I think a lot of people saw it and they're like, I've seen this movie before, like this is how we're going to lose this opener or keep this game super close to an FCS team, right?
Yeah.
For me, I was like, I was 100%, and that was definitely evident in my text to you, was like, I'm not gonna say and write that in stone until the game is over, because I truly believe this was a different team, and I truly believed this was rust in the first half, and that we just needed to get back in there, make some halftime adjustments, and then we would come out firing in the second half, because that's just how much I believed in this particular roster. Thankfully, they supported my theory. They came out firing. Like one of the things I'll try and if I'm remembering all the things that you said, I'm gonna try and talk on at least a little bit of it. I think the first thing about Blesh and just the offense as a whole, I think context matters, right? Last year was his first year as an offensive line coach. He even said in pressers this year that if last year was about guys getting the terminology correct and understanding, this year was about showcasing that and getting this and being able to play guys without having to think through what they had to do on the offensive line. Now it was more about teaching technique than it was the scheme. I think that improvement has showed. I mean, people are like, why were they pressuring us so much? All of that stuff. I mean, tackles for loss, sure, on run plays they had 6, but in terms of quarterback hurries, sacks, 1 sack and 1 quarterback hurry.
Yeah, that was my read. It was like,
Yeah,
good pass protection, but
yeah,
not the best run
yeah.
blocking.
What goes hand in hand with that is, and it was me, Avi, Peter, TD, and a couple other guys on a call last night after the game, just on Discord, just talking about the game. And one thing Peter brought up, and I'm sure he'll bring it up in his podcast too, which is why I'm giving him the credit. This is not my idea, because I'm on the sideline, right? I'm not watching the game from a bird's eye view perspective. But what he was saying is we were running a lot of inside zone. We weren't running anything outside. Like, we're going with our very basic vanilla looks, nothing exotic in terms of power or how we pull guys or trying to create different space opportunities for our running backs elsewhere. We were basically, I think the game plan was they saw the team and was like, I think we can be physical enough to be able to run between the tackles and do it that way. It didn't work in the first half. But I think it started to pick up as the game progressed. And also, I think they limited the playbook really for Auburn. I think they looked at the playbook and was like, I think we can beat these guys with just this, where we don't have to showcase a lot. And we'll go with that moving into Auburn because we have better athletes than they do. And I ultimately think that game plan was successful because I think our athletes did end up beating Davis's athletes in the long run. Like, they had to throw the kitchen sink at us in order to stay competitive in the game, right? The fake squib kick where our 2 guys ran into each other. Like, they're pushing, they're going on 4th down a lot. Like, that's to the point that they realized, I think Plow realized, if I'm going to try and win this game, which I think they were doing, it wasn't to be competitive. It was about trying to win. And if I'm going to try and win, I have to do all of these things in order to maintain that competitiveness with this Power 5 team. And it just, I think because of those successes, it makes this look more like we were incompetent versus them trying everything to try and beat us. Then in the second half, you saw the separation happen. The defense rust came fully off. We'll get into the stats later, but like some of the first ones for me, like that's like, where is it? Like I'm looking at the first and second half stats like separate, right? 234 yards for Davis in the first half, only 70 yards total in the second half. Rushing, they had 19 attempts, average 4.3. Second half, 6 attempts, average 0.2. They had 1 rushing yard. The passing attempts, they had 69 yards on 19 attempts in the second half. In the first half, they had 152 yards and 29 attempts. Third downs, they converted 0-5 in the second half. In the first half, they completed or converted 4 of 8. Right. So even just the statistics show that the defense it came alive. It totally clamped down, and we were flying everywhere. Like the Marcus Harris interception was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Noel Williams. We'll talk about the players later, but Noel Williams had an absolute day. And then Cade's interception that kind of pretty much wrapped up the game there too. I mean, yeah, the guys came to play, particularly in the second half, and I think it was just the rust getting off. These guys haven't. This defense has been playing the same style of offense for the last month and a half, like our offense. So they needed to play a different offense. They needed to play different players, and of course, there was going to be an adjustment period because you've been playing the same body types and the same guys. You know what their little tells are and all of that. And now you're playing against guys where you don't know what they're going to do next. You don't know what their tell is. You don't know what their athletic ability is because you haven't physically matched up against them yet. And then the adjustments, I think, for all of them came in that second half, and they clamped down. So, I mean, even the offense
certainly defensively, I agree with you. I think one of the big questions I have based on what you said, Rob, is when you think about Cal in this game, and the fact that like you said that the coaching staff was pretty convinced that their athletes were better athletes and that they could look ahead. Is that the last 2 years of college football playing out before our eyes, where maybe us as fans are a little bit more used to FCS teams and upsets, but now with the evolution of NIL and the transfer portal, that these gaps are starting to grow even more significantly, like the gap that people talk about between the SEC, Big Ten, and then the rest. And then from there, you have an even bigger growing gap from FCS to, ACC, Big 12.
I mean, you'd have to think so, right? Like, you look at like Idaho, like playing Oregon pretty closely, but who ultimately came out with the win? It was still Oregon. Their talent still came out on top. We took Idaho's probably best defensive player onto our roster. We took UC Davis's best defensive player onto our roster. Like that's just where the talent is. It's just going to rise to the top, right? And it's even more so even in Division I. Like you see the disparity, right? But yeah, I think it is one of those things where I don't think you're going to get the Appalachian States beating Michigan like as often as we did in the past. Like I was as many of the games I tried to watch yesterday, like any of the teams that were playing FCS teams, even though they were close, I don't think there was any FCS team that actually pulled off the upset. Just glancing at the scoreboard. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but just glancing at it, like everyone played it close early on. Like even UW had issues with Weber State, in I think going into halftime, like maybe early in the third quarter, and then they pulled away. So Arizona was playing. Who was Arizona playing?
I'm looking at the Big Sky standings to see if any of these. And so far, you are right that there isn't any upset here over a Power 5 team.
Like Arizona was playing New Mexico last night, right? And the game ultimately ended 61-39. But the game was tied,
It
or
was
like
tight.
a one.
It was close.
It was a one touchdown game in the third quarter.
Yeah,
So
close.
I feel like that was the trend for all of college football. Just everyone just needed the rust to come off, and then when it came off, it just the talent team just won. The deeper rosters just won. And that's where I think sometimes the overreaction might come. Like, people are looking ahead to Auburn and how they scored, I think, 72 points or 77 points yesterday, 73 points.
Yeah.
Against was it Southeast Alabama?
All I know is the teams that the SEC plays are a joke, so I don't put any stock into it.
Right. I mean, but that's what I mean. Like, if you're gonna for me, I feel like it has to go both ways. If you're gonna, I think Auburn played a team, I think in the S&P rankings that was like 250 something, right?
Alabama A&M,
yeah, HBCU, and they
HBCU,
dropped
yeah.
and they dropped 77 or 73 on them. But in the S&P Plus rankings, they're like in the 750s. We play UC Davis, and Davis in the S&P Plus rankings is in like 130s. So we played in relativity, a significantly better opponent than Auburn did. So like, and we shut them out in the second half.
Do you ever think there was a period of time, I'm wondering, like on the win probability chart, if it ever tilted away from us? But let me ask you this, Rob. Who had more total yards?
Total?
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me pull it up.
I know the answer.
Yeah, it's Davis, 304 to 281.
I think the big thing, what you were saying, like you had that confidence, but I still think if like Noel Williams doesn't come back and like take that kick all the way back.
I mean, you could take that touchdown off the board, but we still win.
I know, but it's just familiar. It's just familiar.
And honestly, I mean, to be fair too, like this is like the epitome of a bend not break defense, right? You're going to give up the yards.
Yeah.
You're going to take your chances. Like they're going to get a first down and you're just going to reset for that first down. You're going to give up the yards. But if you only gave up one touchdown while giving up 300 yards, that is a damn good performance. Because you're not going to get 3 and outs all the time. Right?
I agree. I think that the cynic in me looks at that and says, well, if they have a better special teams and it's not Davis, this game could be a lot closer. And I think like an additional fourth quarter touchdown might have been nice. There just needs to be a little bit more strength on the offensive side of the football. And obviously Jaden going out didn't help, but he also didn't look like, second coming of Job at best yesterday. Not to throw like high pressure on him or anything, but he didn't look like the world-class, all conference, all country running back. And I think like our entire offense sort of looked that way. Like we looked like we were in a little bit of a malaise.
Yeah. I mean, I think having a quarterback like switch out, every quarter,
I know,
definitely didn't help
but
that continuity.
I can't fault any fan that's looking at that activity and saying, what the actual hell? I've seen this before. Why don't we have a starter? Right? But just because we've lived that so many different times. And like, to be fair, last season even wasn't that, because we named Sam Jackson the starter, but then he looked so bad that we had to open it back up.
Well,
right? So like
the story with Sam is different from, I think, what's happening right now. I think, so this is my take on what's happening right now. We had a quarterback controversy last year because it looked like Sam Jackson got hurt in the North Texas game, which means he wasn't fully healthy for Auburn, which means we had to play our number 2, which was Ben Finley. Finley didn't look great, so we threw Sam Jackson on, even though he was still hurt. And from there, it just devolved into, are we going to throw Sam Jackson on, who might not be 100% fit, or are we going to throw on Ben Finley? And it just spiraled. And until we got to the point of, if we're going to keep doing this, might as well give the third guy a shot. Right. And then we ended up with Mendoza. I think this year what's happening is we know what these guys have done in practice. Let's use the first game to see if any of these two guys might be able to take advantage of being in an actual live game, because you can't simulate a live game in practice. And remember that was the conversation we had about Mendoza. It was like, yeah, maybe he's the third string because he didn't look good in practice, but what if he's a gamer? What if he's just one of those guys that when the lights turn on and he's on the field and he's playing an actual opponent, like, he tends to play better, right? And that was the argument we were making for Mendoza. And I think that's what they might have been trying to figure out in the Davis game. I don't think we have a quarterback controversy like we did last year and a few years ago. I think this was just, we're going to use the first game as to our advantage because it happens to be an FCS opponent. I think if the first game was Auburn, I don't think we go two quarterbacks. I think we roll with one.
Is it different now? Is the standard no longer where you roll with your starter and then you build up enough of a lead and then you have the next quarterback come in?
I think so.
Versus it sort of seemed like drive to drive.
I think it was more quarter by quarter, if I remember correct. If I remember it correctly, it looked more quarter to quarter than it was drive to drive. So yeah, I think if in the traditional sense of if we had listed Mendoza as the 1, Chandler as the 2, I think that's probably what happens. Like, Chandler probably plays the fourth quarter because we have a 3-score lead. But in this case, I think they just wanted to see if either of them could maybe take that next step if they were playing with the starters in just a real game situation that's tight. So, I mean, I might eat my words later on in the season, but for now, I'm fully in a camp of, I don't think we have a quarterback controversy. I think it's Mendoza, just off of what we saw even in that game, despite what Wilcox said about, like, him, maybe needing a little bit more help and getting some continuity on some drives and being able to push the ball a little bit. Maybe he's putting it on himself and the offensive staff for not being able to maybe get him a few more plays in a sustained drive versus like a 3 and out. But yeah, as of right now, I think it's Mendoza, and I feel like that's how it's going to go.
I think one question I can't decide. I think ultimately that one question I want to leave you with around that I read a decent amount just in the comment section on Right for California.
Sure.
The instant reaction. We'll use this to close the segment, which is that Jaden doesn't get hurt if we're up big in this game.
Yeah, and I don't know. That's a hindsight 2020 thing. Like, Reese got hurt in the first quarter-ish, right? And he doesn't come back. Should he have not played this game then? Like, injuries happen in this sport. We can't blame the narrative and the plot of what's happening in a game and use that as a basis for why this guy got injured.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
I think the more concerning thing for me is just like that none of our running backs besides Jaden looked all that good. I was not like blown away by anybody the same way that I just seem to remember last season where Afonso just became like, I was like, oh, that's my dude.
Right, but that's also Afonso playing as like a bowling ball type running back, right?
Yeah.
It's not like the scheme opened up and he was like, making the one cuts. It was him just, he was just physically stronger and bigger, which is why he was running through guys.
You know who reminded me a lot of him is Larison on Davis. I was like, dude, we should get him as a grad transfer.
I think, well, Callaway, I think, is that type. But I think after the fumble and the scoop and score, it was just, I mean, Wilcox said in the post conference, it was kind of a mix of both of keeping him out due to injury and also because of the scoop. Like, if you go and rewatch that too, like, God, like it's just an unfortunate series of events. Like the ball, he gets hit, like helmet basically hits his knee, right? And in that moment, like the ball also like kind of hits the shoulder pad of the Davis defender and it pops out, and because he's falling and he can't maintain the 5 points of pressure as he's falling, and then the scoop and score happens. Like it's just one of those freak plays in football that happen all the time in college football.
But always seem to happen to Cal at a higher rate. And
I mean, to be fair, that the Stanford TCU game, which I was at on Friday night, had its fair share of those too.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
good perspective.
Yeah.
How was that game, by the way?
It was hilarious.
As our transition.
Absolutely hilarious. We were sitting in between TCU and Stanford fans, and I was wearing Cal gear and was not heckled a single time. I was kind of disappointed. And then the only time I got slightly heckled was after the game. We went to use the bathroom. I come outside. I'm standing there. This old white guy like walks past me, like old Stanford fan, right? And he like gives me the stink eye. And I just like wasn't sure like why. Like, was it because I was wearing Cal gear? Like what? Like what's the like? I'm not even a TCU fan. Like they just beat you. Like you should be mad at them. I'm just here in a Cal hat, like enjoying my time. But outside of that, it was like perfectly fine. I think Caleb Elarm's family was like sitting a couple rows away from us. We saw them wearing their jerseys, and then of course we saw Sonny. We saw Mark Tommerdahl. Yeah, it was a nice little reunion, but Troy Taylor still can't win on Stanford Stadium's field, and Sonny Dykes finally gets his win at Stanford Stadium in a different uniform. So
amazing.